So welcome class to our first session. So today we are going to discuss introductory topics on our subject engineering economics. So this includes consumer and producer goods and services, necessities and luxuries, demand, then competition, monopoly and oligopoly, then the principle of law and supply, law of supply and demand, and then law of diminishing returns, and the engineering economy description and role, and engineering economy study approach. So as for our learning objectives, so pagkatapos nitong subject, of course, we'll be able to define consumer and producer goods and services, and then differentiate necessities, luxuries, and demands, compare and distinguish competition, monopoly, and oligopoly. So later on we'll have concrete examples here in our country. And then number 4, understand the principle of the law of supply and demand. Of course, you have already heard this a lot of times in your high school. And then next, to understand the principle of the law of diminishing returns. And then this topic or this learning objective shall already highlight and advance learnings here, because 1 to 5 are just a sort of a review from what you have learned in terms of economics. So number 6, define engineering economics and describe its role in decision making. And then the last learning objective would be understand and identify the steps in an engineering economy study. So let me start with the question, why study engineering economics? Of course, because there are uncertainties of the future. So as an engineer, we should anticipate those ones. We are not just looking at the present time, but we need to also consider historical data, especially in terms of money and time relationships. Okay? Even a rational method of decision making can sometimes result in bad choices or decisions. Why? Kaya nga kasi sa business, there are expenses, income, and investment. So we should ensure that the maximum return through study of economy. So as for the basics, let us define consumer goods and services. Ang consumer goods and services are the goods and services that are needed by the consumer. And then the producer goods and services, ito naman yung goods and services provided by producers. So there will be two distinct roles here. Yung mga producer, sila yung nagpo-provide, at yung mga consumer, sila yung nag-a-avail ng goods and services. Of course, there's a definition here between consumer and customer. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng customer sa consumer? Well, sa customer, they are the ones who are searching in the marketplace to purchase or procure something, but not necessarily they are the ones who consumes or use the services or the goods. So in short, a customer at the same time pwede siyang maging consumer, or yung customer inutusan lang na bumili pero iba yung magko-consume. An example is when a child inutusan sa mong bumili sa store ng ano, say for example, mantika or sabon, not necessary na yung bata ang gagamit ng sabon or ng mantika, but rather yung nag-utos, of course. So, consumer is the ultimate user of the goods, no? So, kapag customer, siya yung bibili, not necessary siya rin ang gagamit, or pwede rin na siya na rin bumili, siya na rin ang gagamit ng goods and services. So, that is the primary difference between customer and the consumer. Okay? Another basic definitions that we need to know. First, we have the necessities. Of course, this is self-explanatory, no? Or the basic needs of an individual. So, food, clothing, and shelter. So, these are the basic. Luxuries are goods that are not the basic needs of an individual. Car, jewelries, gadgets, computers. So, I would like to point out here that before, our basic needs are only limited to food, clothing, and shelter. But nowadays, yung mga sasakyan that is already a necessity for us, and with the rise of gadgets and computers, even during this time of pandemic, this could become a necessity. Okay? So, it depends on the trend of time. Okay? And, of course, the financial capacity of the society. So, definitions. We have here the demand. Of course, we all know that this is the volume or quantity of a certain commodity that is bought at certain price at a given place and time. So, demand could be elastic demand. So, this is the ratio of the percentage in one variable to the percent change in another variable. A variable is one which responds a lot to small changes in other parameters. Like, for example, price. In elastic demand, variable describes one which does not change much in response to changes in other parameters. So, ibig lang nang sabihin ng elastic demand is that variables one which respond a lot. Okay? Parang hindi niya iniinda kung may variable man na magbago. Okay? While in elastic demand, kumbaga, no choice. No choice na siya. Kailangan mo nang bilhin yun. So, this is the example. Elastic demand is a type of demand that will rise or fall depending on the price of the good. So, malaking impact ng pagbago ng price. For example, candy bars are an elastic demand. If the price of candy is around $1, most people will buy the candy and it will be high in demand. However, kung naging mahal yung candy, of course, kaya mo pa namang tiisin, most people would not buy the candy. Of course, very attractive kasi yung price, but it does not really mean na kailangan ito ng mga consumers. So, dito na rin papasok yung principle ng the needs and the luxuries. So, kung talagang need yan, that could be an inelastic demand. But kapag it is just a luxury or hindi mo naman ganun kailangan, of course, that will fall in elastic demand. So for inelastic demand, it's the opposite. People will buy goods with an inelastic demand no matter what the price is. So the best example would be gas. Sabi nga natin kanina, nowadays a vehicle is becoming more of necessity than that of luxury. So people complain and complain about gas prices, yet they still buy it because they need it, even if it is $3 a gallon. Okay, another example would be life-saving medications. Of course, buhay na rin ang nakataya dito. Yung may mga yung kailangan mag-medicate because of sickness, of course, they have no choice but to buy them, or else they could possibly die. So, hindi lang buhay, hindi lang pera, but also the quality. Okay? The quality won't affect the demand. Like, for example, internet services. Kung may tinatawag na monopoly or very few suppliers ng internet services, of course, kahit na magreklamo tayo, kailangan pa rin natin yung services. So, bibilin pa rin natin yung services even though we have a low quality in it. But if we have some other alternatives that could fall on elastic demand to that particular to a certain particular suppliers or providers. So basically, the elastic demand for a good will rise or fall depending on the price, whereas an inelastic demand for a good won't. Okay, so yung elastic, from the word elastic, is flexible, no? Kapag inelastic, certain changes will have no effect on the demand aspect. Okay, for the competition, when we say competition, when we have an additional vendor, will have a slight effect in the market. Like ukay-ukay, cell phone shops, food vendors, internet cafe, grocery stores, hardware. Okay? And then when we say monopoly, it is actually the opposite of perfect competition. Kasi walang competition because single vendor with unique product or services. So, an example would be emission testing. So, ilan lang dito. Then, Microsoft or Windows, they are actually the providers of software, na universally na ginagamit. Of course, ilan din yung gumagamit ng kanilang rival company like Apple, kasi nga very exclusive yung features nun at medyo mahal. Okay, so for another example of monopoly would be the country's biggest power distributor, yung Meralco. So they have extended their monopolizing the distribution of power from Manila, extending up to the nearby provinces. We also have here the biggest mall monopoly like SM. But we should note that there are regulations that includes monopoly. The state shall regulate or prohibit monopolies when the public interest so requires. No combinations in restraint of trade or unfair competition shall be allowed. This section is a repeat of Section 2, Article 14, or the National Economy and Patrimony of the Nation of the 1973 Constitution, which provided, Section 2, the state shall regulate or prohibit private monopolies when the public interest so requires. No combination in restraint of trade or unfair competition shall be allowed. So what is interesting here, meron nga yung regulation na yan. But the Philippines or our country never had an antitrust or anti-unfair competition law. Okay? So I hope ginagawa na rin ito ng paraan sana. Okay? So that we can avoid what we call monopoly. So another thing is oligopoly. So oli means few, ano? So few suppliers siya. Ngayon, ito dati pwede to gasoline stations, but nowadays dumadami na rin yung gasoline stations. Ika nga mas marami pang gasoline station kaysa sa ATM machine, ano? Dito sa atin, ano? And then we have the farm supply, the printing press. Noon ilan lang ang may printing press, but nowadays this is a growing industry. So ito, commercial air travel, of course, yung mga airport, auto industry, yeah, like Toyota, very few lang naman sila, Toyota, Ford, Nissan, yung mga Mitsubishi, etc. So we also have soft drinks company, ano lang, si Coca-Cola at si Pepsi, ano. So we also have streaming market like Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon. Actually, Netflix tops all streaming market today. And we also have here in the country, San Miguel Corporation as one of the oligopoly. So, moving on to law of supply and demand. So this is actually an economic model of price determination in a market. So in a competitive market, the unit price for a particular good will vary until it settles at a point where the quantity demanded by the consumer will be equal to the quantity supplied by the producers, resulting in an economic equilibrium of price and quantity. So meaning, kapag nag-equate yung quantity demanded to that of quantity supplied, maganda yung role ng pera or the trade. Kaya nga, for example, in a construction industry, no, maglalabas ng pera ang government to build infrastructures, ano. So when that happens, the government will pay yung services ng contractors, will pay the accomplishment, etc. Of course, we know that the contractors are purchasing materials, hiring laborers, and consuming goods and services. So meaning, in that aspect alone, marami ng economic activities. Kaya nga pag medyo mabagal ang paggastos ng government in terms of infrastructure projects, may mga regulations dyan na to sanction yung mga may kasalanan, no? Kasi nga ang one of the purpose of building infrastructure is also to boost the economy. Okay? So actually dun tayo nakabawi on the build program of the present administration, ano? Nakabawi tayo sa economy because kung maganda yung role ng money, so magandang economic activities. Ngayon, pag na-delay yung project, kung walang accomplishment, walang bayad. Kung walang bayad, walang pangpasweldo. Kung walang pangpasweldo, walang bibili ng makakain or someone who will consume the goods and services. So, ganon. So, malaki talaga yung impact kapag na-delay ang isang project. So, if the demand for a commodity increases, but the supply does not increase equally, the price will increase, of course. If the supply of a commodity increases, but the demand for that commodity does not increase equally, the price will decrease. If the demand for a commodity decreases, but the supply does not decrease equally, the price will decrease. If the supply of a commodity decreases, but the demand does not decrease equally, the price will increase. So, those are the scenario. Of course, alam naman natin, price is also a factor, okay, in that law of supply and demand. Of course, meron din yung tinatawag na, yung diniscuss natin kanina earlier about necessity and luxury. So there are 4 basic laws of supply and demand. So the first is, if demand increases and supply remains unchanged, higher equilibrium of price and quantity. So maraming nangangailangan o konti yung supply, ito higher equilibrium of price and quantity. So ngayon, kapag konti na lang nangangailangan, ganun pa rin yung supply mo, the lower the equilibrium of price and quantity. So hindi maganda yan. And then, if supply increases and demand remains unchanged, the lower equilibrium of price and quantity. So, kung maraming supply, ganun pa rin yung demand, hindi rin maganda yun. Kasi, sobra yung nagawang supply. Kaya kung minsan, pag bumili ka ng some products na hindi masyadong, or rare na product na hindi masyadong nabebenta, and pag binili mo, napakamahal, no? That is why sa mga auto supply or what we call motor shops, meron silang tinatawag na code. What is this code all about? The historic, yung mga products na ini-stock nila, okay, kasi maraming bumibili. Pero there are also product na nag-i-stock nga sila, kaya lang konti lang ang bumibili. So basically, yung management dito is inventory, no? So inventory management for you to acquire the code, okay, to be successful in the business. So another law here, if supply decreases and demand remains unchanged, then higher the equilibrium of price and quantity. So this is quite similar to the first. Ang magkapares is number 1 rule and the number 4. Ang magkapares din is number 2 and number 3. So again, demand depends on the following. First, price is a factor. Price of related commodities. Kung may competition, ano? saan ka pa pupunta sa mas mura, di ba? And then consumers income and taste. Of course, there's the element of the trend and the quality, no? So supply depends on the following all elements like the price of inputs or production. Kung napakahirap i-produce ang isang product, that could be a factor. But nowadays, with the rise of what we call automation and artificial intelligence, nami-minimize or na-optimize yung price ng production. Okay? So, yan. Papasok na yung techniques of production. Those mentioned like automation and artificial intelligence. And mechanizing the system. Okay? So, common din sa supply tsaka demand, ito, price of similar products. So, they are both affected by that. So, if buyers are willing to purchase more than what is available in the market, they will tend to bid the price up. If more of a commodity available than buyers willing to purchase, suppliers will bid prices down. Kung napakaraming supply, of course, patawad, no? Hihingi yan ng tawad. There is a tendency in price equilibrium where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. So, if you can manage to attain price equilibrium, then you have a good inventory management, okay, in your business. So, moving on, we have the law of diminishing returns. Economic law stating that if one input is used in the manufacture of a product is increased while all other inputs remain fixed, a point eventually be reached at which input yields progressively smaller increases in output. So, ang ibig sabihin lang nito, if you want to increase the production or the output, of course, you might increase your human resources as well as machine resources. But it does not necessary na pag nag-deploy ka ng napakaraming tao, mag-yield yan sa mas malaking output. So it does not mean that yun, pag ginawa mo yun, ensured ka na yung output mo or proportional yung mga dineploy mo na makaka-deliver ng output in a shorter time, in a shorter time. A farmer will find that a certain number of farm workers will yield the maximum output per worker. If that number exceeded, the output per worker will fail. So, say for example, in a construction industry, ito similar scenario dito sa farm. Construction industry tayo. Papabuhos ka ng, say for example, beams and slab of your house. Ngayon, gusto mong bilisan na o mag-deploy ka ng 100 tao. So, hindi ibig sabihin na nag-deploy ka ng 100 manpower to do the pouring of concrete will fast track. Of course, it will fast track the output. However, kapag na-reach niya yung certain yield point ng production with regards to the number of productivity rate, so bababa pa yung output actually. So kapag napakaraming personnel in the site, konti lang naman yung resources mo, ang tendency niyan is mamumulaklak sila. So ibig sabihin nun, magpo-form sila ng circle, magkwekwentuhan na lang yan, wala nang gagawin. Yung tinatawag na namumulaklak. Okay, so that is about law of diminishing returns. So engineering economy takes into account the following: the value of money, cash flows, equivalence, as well as the economic value. So of course, with the essence of time, nag-iiba-iba yung value ng money. So meron tayong tinatawag na purchasing power of the money. Okay? Kaya pag nag-invest ka, for example, sa mga networking, so you should also consider the value of money and time, or money and time relationship. Why? Halimbawa, kumikita ka nga, pero lugi naman pala in terms of the inflation rate. So those are the things that you need to look into in terms of engineering economy. Of course, another factor here is the equivalence and the economic value as mentioned. So engineering economy involves formulating, estimating, and evaluating the expected economic outcomes of alternatives designed to accomplish a defined purpose. Mathematical techniques simplify the economic evaluation of alternatives. So actually, we are measuring and analyzing the value of time and money in order to come up with a sound judgment and decision. So there are 4 essential elements of decision and estimate. So these are cash flows. Later on, we will learn how to construct cash flow diagrams. So this is a very important diagram in our analysis. And on that diagram, of course, we are considering the second one, times of occurrence of cash flows, and then of course the rate of interest for time value of money, and then the measure of economic worth for selecting an alternative. So here we have the sensitivity analysis as a basic tool to be utilized in order to determine how a decision might change according to varying estimates, especially those expected to vary widely. Example tayo, no? An engineer is performing an analysis of warranty cost for drivetrain repairs within the first year of ownership of luxury cars purchased in the United States. He found the average cost to be $570 per repair from data taken over a 5-year period. So these are the data from 2006 to 2010. Pinag-add niya lang yung mga value ng average ng cost per repair per year, then divided by 5, dun yun nakuha yung $570. So the question is, what range of repair costs should the engineer use to ensure that the analysis is sensitive to changing warranty costs? So basically, it is obvious that the repair cost is fluctuating. Okay? Fluctuating constantly from 2006 to 2010. But yung fluctuation ng 2008, 2009 to 2010 medyo magkakalapit. So those are the consideration. So solution, at the first glance, the range should be approximately negative 25% to positive 15%, basing dun sa average na 570. For example, yung pinakamababa is 430, ano? So just subtract 570 minus 430 divided by 570. So that is at negative 25% fluctuation. Okay? Similarly, we will get here the largest value, 650 minus 570 divided by 570. That will be the positive 15%. To include the low of 430 and the high of 650. So that is within the context ng lahat or the fluctuation from the 2006 to 2010 for a 5-year period. But if we are going to consider yung sinasabi kong consistent, medyo magkakalapit siya sa 2008, 2009, tsaka 2010, the last 3 years of course are higher and more consistent with an average of $631. So ito yung 631 could be the basis for the computation of the fluctuation values. So the observed values are approximately positive, negative 3% of this more recent average. So if the analysis is to use the most recent data and trends, a range of say positive or negative 5% of $630 is recommended. However, the analysis is to be more inclusive of historical data and trends. A range of say plus minus 20% or plus minus 25% of 570 is recommended. So as I've said, from the average nga, the whole, kung gagamitin natin yon, so yung last statement ang recommended. Ngayon, kapag recent data, positive or negative 5% of $630 is recommended. So, paano nakuha yung 25%? 525 minus 430 divided by 570, or the average 570 minus yung pinakamababa divided by 570. Oh, yun. 24.56. So 570 minus 430 divided by 570. So that will yield to negative 24.56 or 25%. So, saan naman ako yung 15%? 570 less, yung pinakamataas, 650 divided by 570, ayun, 14%. Okay? So, that is for sensitivity analysis. So, sensitivity analysis would depend on your perspective. Either you consider the latest data or the trend, or you consider the historical data for the whole data, 2006 to 2010. So we have here the measure of worth, the criterion used to select an alternative in engineering economy for a specific set of estimates is called the measure of worth. So these are, number 1, present worth, PW. Meron din tayong ROR, or rate of return. We have also payback period, the future worth, cost benefit, and then economic value added, or the EVA, and the annual worth, capitalized cost, cost effectiveness. So these are actually the topics that we expect later on, no? So all the measures of worth account for the fact that money makes money over time. This is the concept of the time value of money. It is well known fact that money makes money. The time value of money explains the change in the amount of money over time for funds that are owned, invested, or owed, borrowed. This is the most important concept in engineering economy. O kapag nag-business ka, gusto mong you wanted to borrow for your investment. Of course, you want to ensure that may pambayad ka ng interest. Baka mamaya naubos lang lahat ng investment mo, wala ka nang pambayad sa utang mo. So that is the concept. The time value of money is very obvious in the world of economics. If we decide to invest capital in a project today, we inherently expect to have more money in the future than we invested. Okay? If you borrow money today, in one form or another, we expect to return the original amount plus some additional amount of money. So, hindi lang tayo nagbe-base. We are not just basing on the figure itself, but the purchasing power of money. Okay? So, engineering economics is equally well suited for the future and for the analysis of past cash flows in order to determine if a specific criterion was attained. For example, assume you invested that value 4,975 exactly 3 years ago in 53 shares of IBM stock as traded on NYSE at $93.86 per share. You expect to make 8% per year appreciation, not considering any dividends that IBM may declare. So, aside from dividends, gusto mo na kumita yung investment mo ng 8%. So, a quick check of the share value shows it is currently worth 127.25 per share for a total of 6744.25. So this increase in value represents a rate of return of 10.67% per year. So ito matututunan natin later on, the ROR method as one of the economic analysis. So ngayon, 10.67 yan. It was found that the ROR is 10.67. Dito mo na makita na it is more than what you expect na 8%, ano? Okay, so meaning your investment is feasible according to your requirement and expectation. So this past investment has well exceeded the 8% per year criterion over the last 3 years. So these are the steps in performing an engineering economic study. So first, identify and understand the problem. Next is identify the objective of the project. Then collect relevant available data and define viable solution alternatives. Make realistic cash flow estimates. Identify an economic measure of work criterion for decision making. So later on we will enumerate those economic measures. So in a while we will see that economic measures. Or I think it was already flashed a while ago. So evaluate each alternative, consider non-economic factors, and then use sensitivity as needed. Then select the best alternative, and then from that selection, of course, you need to implement the solution, of course, monitor the results. So on that steps, we can translate that in seven principles of engineering economy. The steps in an engineering economy study are as follows. First, we need to develop the alternatives. Second, focus on the differences. Then use a consistent viewpoint. Use a common unit of measure. Consider all relevant data. Make uncertainty explicit. Then revisit your decisions. Okay, ito yun. So let us have developing the alternative. So first we need to define the problem carefully, and then what are the alternatives need to be identified and then defined for subsequent analysis. Then a decision involves making a choice among two or more alternatives. Next, developing and defining the alternatives for detailed evaluation is important because of the resulting impact on the quality of decision. So later on we will learn, in a while we will learn this one. The next, engineers and managers should place a high priority on this responsibility. Then creativity and innovation are essential to the process. Okay? So for example, we need to buy a car. Between these three alternatives, say alternative A is a Toyota Corolla, and then second alternative, Honda Civic or Prius. Prius is a brand of Toyota rin yata to. So focus on the differences. Of course, kapag common naman yung alternative, you wanted to disregard that kasi common naman siya. Okay? So only the differences in the future outcomes of the alternatives are important. So outcomes that are common to all alternatives can be disregarded in the comparison and decision. Say for example, we have those specifications that could be a basis in our alternative, whether Corolla, Civic, or Prius, ano. Of course, we have the red marks here, no? Bakit naka-red mark yan? Kasi nga, pare-parehas lang naman sila. Okay? Walang pagkakaiba in terms of price, the capacity of the engine, pare-parehas yung transmission, and the seating capacity. So, walang pagkakaiba. So, anong pang compare mo dyan? So, what we wanted to focus to is the fuel average or the fuel consumption. Ano? So, Corolla has 13 kilometers per liter, Civic 11 kilometers per liter, and then Prius 19 kilometers per liter. So, kung yun ang magiging basehan natin, of course, our choice is the Prius. So, mas matipid siya. So, in terms of safety, mas maraming airbag naman yung Prius. Then, the performance, ang pinakamalakas is, of course, yung mas kukunti yung konsumo. Malakas nga, pero malakas din ang kumuha ng gas. Okay? Meaning, it's not that fuel efficient because of the power. But, kung on the perspective of yung mga middle class, they would prefer yung mas efficient before power. Diba? Ngayon, kapag yung bibili is mabisyo or mayaman, marami namang pangbili ng gas, of course, pipiliin niya is yung power before fuel consumption. Okay? So, that's it. So, another criteria here is the resale value after 2 years. So, yung Prius, mabibenta pa rin ng mas mahal among the two. Okay? Again, it would depend kung anong perspective. Whether perspective ng mayaman na maraming panggas, di bali na kahit hindi na mabenta ng mahal, or within the perspective of customer or consumer, or looking at the economic feasibility of the car. Okay? So, number 3, hold same viewpoint. So, this is what I'm discussing. This is about what I'm discussing. So, viewpoint ng mayaman at viewpoint ng mahirap. Okay, the prospective outcomes of the alternative should be consistently developed from a defined viewpoint. Kasi nga, meron silang magkaibang perception on that matter. Okay? And in the perspective of decision maker, which is often that of owner, would normally be used. Okay? So the viewpoint for the particular decision be first defined, then used consistently in the description, analysis, and comparison of the alternatives. Okay. So, yun yung in-example ko kanina. Regardless ng price, kahit naman mahal, kung matipid na. So, it depends. Okay? Power or performance. Or power or fuel consumption. Okay? So, those are the consideration. So, number 4, we're going to use common units of measure because we are actually comparing. So, paano mako-compare kung iba yung unit mo. Yung resale ng kabila, dollars. Tapos yung isa, peso. So, how could you possibly compare them? Okay, so this is just a common sense in terms of comparison. Okay? Using more than one monetary units for economic analysis will complicate the project. Spending in dollars, tapos earning in rupees. Okay? So, for example, the price, dapat all in terms of rupees, ano? PKR. PKR. Then, the engine capacity in terms of CC. Transmission, lahat sila automatic. Seating capacity, persons. Fuel average, kilometers per liter. So, lahat. Pare-parehas yung units, ano? And then, number 5, use all relevant criteria. The decision maker will normally select the alternative that will best serve the long-term interests of the owner. So, in engineering economic analysis, the primary criterion relates to long-term financial interest. So, sinasabi ko na when you invest, you're not just looking at the monetary value today, but also some value in the future. The value of your investment in the future, of course, considering inflation, depreciation, and interest. Okay. So, assumption is that available capital will be allocated to provide maximum monetary return to the owners. So, napakadaling mag-decide kung alam mo na yung investment or the alternative shall give you the return or ROR, rate of return that you wanted to, or your expectation. So, there are other non-financial criteria in an organizational objectives you would like to achieve with your decision, and this should be considered and given weight in the selection of an alternative. Say for example, ano ba yung mga non-financial criteria? For example, sa mga tatlong sasakyan na yun, you wanted to consider the availability of the pyesa in the market, ano? Or sa Toyota ka, di ba? Kasi maraming pyesa. Kahit daw sa bakery, meron. So, ganun karami daw yung pyesa ng Toyota. So, that is why those could be a non-financial criteria you wanted to consider. Okay? Say, for example, here, registration and token tax. So, wanted to consider also the performance, seating capacity, the country of assembly. So, those are non-economic or non-financial criteria. Yung mga naka-green, seating capacity, performance, country of assembly. So, of course, there are uncertainties na kailangan mo rin i-consider explicitly. Meaning, explicitly, this is something that is outside your control. So, risk and uncertainty are inherent in estimating the future outcomes of the alternatives and should be recognized. The analysis of the alternatives involves projecting or estimating the future consequences associated with each of them. The magnitude and the impact of future outcomes of any course of action are uncertain. Dealing with uncertainty is an important aspect of engineering economy analysis. So, one of the planning tools, yung tinatawag na SWOT analysis. Dito may benchmark ka. What are the risks or the possible threats that could be expected either within your organization or within outside. So those are what we call uncertainties. Say for example, ito nga, spare parts price sa Corolla much cheaper, sa Civic mas expensive, Prius mas expensive. Sa Corolla naman maraming pyesa, Honda naman maraming pyesa, sa Prius o konti yung pyesa. And then of course, when you have the choice, you must have to review and revisit your decision. So a good decision making process can result in a decision that has an undesirable outcome. Other decisions, even though relatively successful, will have results significantly different from the initial estimates of the consequences. Learning from and adapting based on experience are essential and are indicators of good organization. So, kapag nag-decide ka na, the best option is the Prius. Now, best option, if you review and revisit option A, considering new model policies, no? Now best option. And then review and revisit B if we have option B to be that was selected, no? So under Corolla, you must have to consider also the new model coming soon. Under Prius, we have to consider also the import policies. So those are the examples. Okay, so we are done with our lecture for today. So your learning activity for today is a seat work. So this seat work, you will group yourselves into five members, and then work on this, create a PowerPoint solution. So next meeting, you will be required to present your output considering A, B, C, and D. So we have here a scenario. While studying for the engineering economy final exam, you and two friends find yourselves craving for a fresh pizza. You can spare the time to pick up the pizza and must have it delivered. So there are two alternatives here, no? Pick up sticks offers a 1-inch stick including toppings, 20-inch square pizza with your choice of two toppings for $15 plus 5% sales tax and a $1.5 delivery charge. No sales tax on delivery charge. And then for the Fred's pizza, it offers the round deep dish Sasquatch, which is 20-inch in diameter. It is 1 3/4 thick, which includes two toppings and costs $17.25 plus 5% sales tax and free delivery. So letter A, what is the problem in this situation? Letter B, systematically apply the 7 principles of engineering economy to the problem you have defined in part A. And letter C, assuming that your common unit of measure is in dollars, what is the better value for getting a pizza based on the criterion of minimizing cost per unit of volume. Finally, letter D, what other criteria might be used to select which pizza to purchase? So this is quite a simple example. So just follow the 7 principles of engineering economy. So don't worry, I will also forward this reference to you for your basis. So group yourselves into 5, and later on you're gonna present it in a synchronous meeting with you. So work on this, and see you on the next meeting.